Hey, welcome to the Dwayne and Jennifer podcast. But today, for this special episode, you only get me. Happy Father's Day to all you fathers. And I'm excited. We're doing kind of a unique episode. This is a one-off episode specifically around the topic of fathers. But really, did an amazing interview with a friend of mine. And it's his journey leaving IHOP and charting just a little bit of a different course. And so they left IHOP several years ago and just found some other waters to drink from. And in that has had a pretty challenging journey, but also a beautiful maturing process. And so we did talk specifically about just the journey of developing and growing as a man. But more than that, that journey of maturity and walking through difficult times and the purpose for it and what it brings forth when you stay the course. And so I think it was a phenomenal interview. I really enjoyed our conversation. And I personally think everyone is going to find really great fruit from it, great help from it. So I would encourage you to stick around and enjoy the interview. All right. I'm super excited, Isaac, to have you jump in. How long have we known each other?
I think 3 years, 4 years, maybe.
I think, yeah, at least like that. So I wanted to interview Isaac because of what I have seen of him on his journey. And, we're looking at Father's Day today. And I'm actually very impressed, Isaac, with your journey and just how I've seen you, I think, grow, mature. But let's jump in. But first of all, just introduce yourself a little bit for us.
Yeah. I'm married. My wife's name is Cherish. We've been married 12 years. And we've got 3 sons that are, soon they'll be 9, 7, and 6. So 3 boys. I've been in Kansas City about 16 years, originally from Michigan. My wife grew up in Kansas City, so my wife Cherish is a native to this area, and it's home for us. Attended...
Lively household, 3 boys, lively household.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah,
you got great boys.
I mean, there's a good chance like one could come busting in while we're recording this. But our house is always loud. But it's so much fun. They are such a joy, and I think oftentimes my reflection these days is that my boys are the medicine that I need. Their joy, their play, their physicality. It's usually getting me kind of out of a grumpy mood to participate in what they're up to. So,
come on. So you originally moved here for IHOP, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's back in 2009. I moved here for IHOP.
That's crazy. And how old were you? Like you were young.
17. Yeah, I was really young.
17. Crazy. So you kind of did the IHOP U thing, graduated, and then what? Did you join staff for a while, or did you?
Yeah, we did a couple years of staff. We did a short, maybe 6 months in Asia, kind of working with some ministries in Hong Kong. And then I think it was about 7 years total between school and staff.
Okay.
And my wife and I got married right after we finished the Bible school portion. Yeah.
And you can go into this or not. I'll give you, but how has been, well, first of all, why'd you leave IHOP? Like what was there a particular reason?
I think that so we actually left IHOP in formally, I think 2016, but then we were still kind of attending the church off and on for a couple more years. And eventually we left, I think ultimately due to just kind of a misalignment of vision for our family and what we really wanted to raise our sons in, to raise our family in. I think that we really were looking for more of a focus of a true local church that was focused on discipling kids and families, and didn't have such a global emphasis, to put it, I think, in short.
Totally.
There's a lot we could say there.
Yeah, there is a lot there. And in kind of, you can comment a lot on this, or if you don't want to, you'd say pass as well. But just give us briefly on how have you been kind of walking through the news of the last 2 years, basically, year and a half, whatever it's been.
Yeah.
How have you processed that? And then in light of your decision leaving, are you?
Sure.
I'll throw that in.
Yeah. Well, I think part of it does go back to that decision is, at the time, we didn't really have any stark, real big, obvious reasons to leave, which is part of what made the decision somewhat challenging. But I think ultimately for me is, as I observed the fruit of IHOP's ministry over a decade, kind of at that point or somewhere in that range, I just wasn't seeing good fruit in the lives of individuals, which was a bit disorienting because, the proclamation from the platform and the web stream and the website and all the things makes it look like things are great. And just so many stories of friends of mine, families that we knew, kind of marriages imploding. And so just the fruit was not good, and to be frank. And so then I think with everything that came out, it was not surprising to kind of start to learn behind. Of course, we took no pleasure in the level of kind of darkness and deception, but I think that it really began to make sense for myself and my wife, as far as when you're leading people, you're only going to be as fruitful as you are personally. If you're truly engaging your heart. But as far as for myself, and I can't speak for my wife, just what it's been like in light of the last 18 months, it's been very disorienting to have such foundational years of my formation and faith, to have come through the house of prayer, and so many to discern between the theology that was spoken and then the fruit of the lives of those that were leading. It's been a real process to discern what parts of my faith I still cling to, and the orthodoxy of my faith I'm so thankful for, but then I think probably ultimately the expression of faith and what it looks like in a community context, in a ministry context, in a vocational context. I'm still very much actively sorting through the impact of all that.
Totally. I think, and we met, actually, you guys jumped into our local community, and that's how kind of we got to know each other.
That's right.
And I mean, I remember, I think you came to like meeting 3 or something, and it was like maybe 6 of us in the room. I remember you kind of came and checked us out before your family came. And so pretty much early on, I found out that you were kind of going on this, you've been on a journey for a while. And just kind of what is maturity? What is becoming mature as a man, stepping into fatherhood, all that whole topic. What was kind of the thing in the heart that caused me to go, I want to go down this trail a little bit?
I think that it was primarily in the context of marriage. So early in our marriage, Cherish and I were still part of the House of Prayer community. And there was this, of course, there's like the growing up phase or the maturing or the developmental phase that happens through those years of 17 to 25 or whatever. I mean, and especially within Christendom, having grown up in a Christian family, and then here I was submerged in this hyper spiritual community, I was really reaching for models or examples of how to do this thing called marriage. And I would say that I didn't have, well, I think to say it plainly is like I just didn't have the tools. You can read about marriage, you can kind of be a student of marriage, but it really isn't until you're in a marriage that you get to learn what really works and what doesn't. And
100%.
For the most part, I was finding that the tools that I had were not sufficient to love my wife well, to create an environment, a home where she felt cared for, safe, known, loved. And that was very, again, to use the word, disorienting, because here I was surrounded in this Christian community that it wasn't offering me tools and resources for, at that point, the most important role I had in my life, which was as a husband.
Yes.
And so, yeah, the journey really began out of a necessity of what wasn't working for me personally. And then I would say kind of the crux of that was when we were pregnant with our second and found out that we were going to have another son. And for whatever reason, for me personally, having two sons kind of freaked me out a little bit of,
Okay.
like, one I could handle, but now I'm going to have like brothers. And, later, of course, we'd have now our third son. But when we were expecting our second, and once again, I was just aware of the places within me that I felt so inadequate or ill-equipped to handle what it meant to be a father to sons. So that was kind of, the beginning stage for me, as I was seeing in my impact on Cherish. And our kids were very young at that point, but, beginning to observe, like, I don't have what my wife needs or what my kids need. I got to figure this out.
I mean, and it's I would say I had we kind of we left IHOP in 2013, but I craved that. But I think you're probably even a little bit more mature in that you go, I got to make a change. I was just, I had my own issues I was trying to work through, even as a man. And when you're in a dysfunctional biological family community, these things start to emerge. And it's true. You're going, hey, who can help me here with navigate this?
Yeah.
And what's sad is in the community you were in, there was nobody there to kind of say, hey, I want to help you become a man. I want to take you. And that's actually tragic. That's a little bit sad.
And I feel fortunate because there were just enough models within our friendship group or our friend circle that, thankfully there was a family that did model what healthy, thriving marriage could look like. And it was just a boost, or just enough for me to go, man, I think that's more what I'm after. And
wow.
And actually, I'm really thankful that it wasn't someone that was full-time at IHOP. They were modeling for me of what it could look like as someone that's working full-time, raising a family. And it's possible to be a wholehearted lover of God while, working. And I think even reorienting me to the significance or the importance of the marriage relationship, the parenting relationship, and just how crucial and godly it really was.
Amen. Yeah. Amen. And so what was those initial kind of steps that you made going, hey, this is actually water for my soul? Mm-hmm. Where did you start drinking from?
I think the place that really helped me start was with the resources from John Eldredge and Wild at Heart. Those books, specifically Fathered by God, was just starting to put language to the places in me as a man that I needed to be developed or to grow. And so it was just starting in very generic, broad terms of these categories of development. And so John Eldredge puts them into, these broad categories of boyhood and warrior and lover and king and sage, and just the overarching kind of areas of life where, man, I had some gaps in boyhood, or did I really know what it was like to be the cowboy, and what that does to a soul? Go ahead.
So just kind of break those down a little bit, because he lays it out. This is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but
Yeah.
this is the journey of kind of the general journey of becoming a man, and these are kind of the stages of the journey. Can you just break them down a little bit?
So in the boyhood phase, up to maybe 10, 11, it's really just developing this sense of being the apple of your father's eye, or even your mother, and just that sense of, I belong, I'm loved unconditionally, and just this delighted in sense of, I know that I'm delighted in, I'm loved, and I'm enjoyed by my parents. And so just the safety that creates for a human heart, I think it's crucial. And then the next phase being cowboy, and the ages can be kind of interchangeable. They don't have to be hard and fast, but this idea of cowboy, anywhere from 11, 12 to 20-ish, 23 even, is this sense of needing to test your strength and starting to even put together that your strength is needed. Like it's a good thing. And so adventure is a crucial category for the heart of a young man to explore, and wilderness, and to kind of test yourself, to find that your strength is real. And then it's kind of this transition into the warrior. So the warrior going, my strength is needed on behalf of the service of others, that what I have to offer in strength is a blessing, and it can be the picture of like the round table of knights, like to have a seat at the table where you're contributing to a cause. And then the lover phase is just this important aspect of the heart of a man that's actually moved by beauty. There's certainly a polar opposite to that, of what does it say about a man that is so hardened by battle or war that your heart is actually so shut down that you can't be moved by beauty. And so it's essential to becoming a husband. It doesn't necessarily mean it's synonymous with falling in love or romancing a woman's heart, but there is an aspect of it for sure that a man was made to be moved by beauty, and a key part of that is by in that marriage relationship, by the heart of a woman. The last two categories is king. So stepping into this role of rulership, your domain and dominion, bringing now your strength under control to actually lead and serve and love the people that are entrusted to your care. For me, primarily, that really just means my wife and my kids. As a man that's leading my household, all that happens within my realm of influence, is it truly bearing fruit and bringing goodness to those under my care? And there's, I forget who exactly made the quote, but it's the story of most of human history is men being entrusted with power and those under their care, it bringing harm. And so what does it look like to partner with God in this role of influence, and for my leadership, my what's been entrusted to me to actually flourish under my care? And then the last phase being the sage, and that really being now where the sage is turning back towards the broader community and offering their strength in a different role of service, and imparting wisdom and guidance as the warriors and lovers and kings are in need of guides in their path. So that's at a high level. That's a lot.
And it's super, and it's super general, like
Yes.
the age, what you're saying. So
Yep.
what I find, what I just find interesting is that the community that we were a part of at IHOP, I would say was very Gnostic, meaning we had this vision for high spirituality, and this was the greatest goal, was to have a profound relationship with God.
Yeah.
But we never really focused actually on developing of the person.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I've just wanted to even partly, was one of the motivators for interviewing you today, even was because you've gone on, you have not actually left spirituality, but you focus now on what are those places that I've missed in my development as a man, so that I can have a healthy marriage, be an amazing father, and then even in your career. So am I getting that right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that only in the last few years would I say, or begin to say, that the development of a man is always the whole man. It's not just in your spiritual kind of expression. To mature and to grow, it has to happen holistically across the board. And like you were saying, is I would now view that as growing into what it means to be an image bearer, to become more like Christ in my emotions, in my styles of relating to people, in engaging in becoming a more integrated whole person. All of that is part of what it means to become more of the image of Christ being formed in me. And so early on, it was mostly kind of chasing the symptoms of where my spirituality wasn't working. This place of spiritual elitism, it doesn't work or matter when I'm in a fight with my wife.
Come on.
It doesn't offer me anything. And so that, I think, was really started to begin to shift for me, is like, just because you're engaging in these more radical expressions of faith doesn't make you a good husband. And in some ways, are you even engaging with those at the detriment of what it means to be a good husband?
Wow. So I'm going to mention two things, and then I don't know if it makes sense to tie them together.
Yeah.
But through this journey, your biological family has, maybe some of the dysfunctions there have been emerging in the last couple of years. And then bring that into, you use the word integrated. I want you, does that fall in line, or is that two topics? You can answer that either way. Because your biological family massively impacts what kind of person you've become.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And that has just been emerging for you. And then speak into integration. What does that even mean?
Yeah. I think that it's absolutely a part of the conversation, and it's part of my current real-time process of making sense of my recovery, even from IHOP. I would trace it all the way back to my family of origin and the development that was happening there as a boy, as a young man, and who I was at 17 when I landed at IHOP, was a result of my family system, my upbringing. So it's all intertwined and intertangled. Of my development as an adult started, when I left the house, but it was already in motion. And so what I would say is I had to become curious about why it was that at 22, 23, when I entered into marriage, I didn't have a category for what it looked like or meant to lovingly engage my wife in conflict. I didn't have a model in my home that showed me this is what it looks like to engage in conflict with a spouse in a loving, kind way, where two people that love each other can disagree and very lovingly get to the other side of that.
Mm.
So where the gaps began to show for me, I think, as I've pulled on that thread was, I think I left my home pretty underdeveloped emotionally, in terms of emotional connection, acknowledging the ways in which my need for engaging with my emotions, but then also relationally, the role of mother and father and what they played to me in my development. I would say, pretty malnourished or underformed when I left my house at 17, which I would say left me incredibly vulnerable to another storyline to fill the void of what I needed as a young man. I needed to know who I was.
Right.
And so IHOP kind of played that narrative perfectly. Come be part of this radical expression of what it looks like to love God and live your life as a Christian. It fit and checked a lot of boxes for me of something to throw myself into that would make sense of my life. And I think that I was looking for that as a result of some of the gaps in my formation, in my family of origin.
That's, I mean, that's pretty insightful. Can you give an example, just so people can kind of grab, like, where would you, is there something where you would say, I wasn't developed here, and then maybe here's the cause of underdevelopment, how it worked itself? Do you have an example?
Yeah, and this could get really technical, and it's very real time for me still. But I think when you start to look at some broad categories of true self, false self. So this was an introductory category for me a number of years ago of my true self anchored, united with Christ, at peace, at rest. Um, I'm not doing acrobatics to fit in with somebody. I know who I am. I feel at rest. Versus my false self will do whatever it takes to avoid experiencing shame or pain. And so that looks like I'll be whoever I need to be to fit in. I'll be whoever I need to be for the leader to like me or to get approval. And so that categories kind of started to shine light on for me of the areas of my life where I would squirm or I couldn't be true. I had to come in as the husband, kind of heavy-handed and dominant, and I'm right, was really just a mechanism to hide because I didn't know how to be wrong and be loving. I didn't
Wow.
know how to take ownership of my areas where I was missing it and not experience shame. So instead of experiencing shame, I'm just going to argue and turn it around on my wife where to make her think that she's wrong. So those were some of the places where when I got honest and was brave enough to look at my impact of the ways in which I would try to hide from shame and pain, was
Yep.
really my false self at work, trying to prop up something that actually wasn't me. And so that took a lot of work to start to notice that, first of all, but then to have the courage to go, gosh, wouldn't it be nice if I didn't have to do all of this posturing or twisting and turning to avoid shame or pain, and which really at the end of the day is just trying to tell me something. I don't know if that exactly answered your
No,
question.
it does actually, because you're saying, I'm kind of asking the question, but you're saying that if I would have had some areas that would have been better developed at 24 years old, I would have had the strength to be humble before my wife, but I wasn't properly developed. So I did not have the grace to go, hey, I'm wrong. Please forgive me. Just real simple example. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I still, because of the real time nature of this, I want to be very loving and honoring towards my parents. And I think I can say that's like I had some gaps when it comes to what loving attachment looked like, as a crucial component of what it means to be formed and developed as a human, as a soul. As I was made for healthy, loving attachment, the safety of the confines of attachment with mother and father. And when that's not present, or to the degree that that's maybe been damaged or kind of broken, I will, as a person, go looking for a source of love, attachment, safety. And so that can take shape and form in maybe a reach for extreme spiritual expression. It could take shape and form in addiction, anything that's going to offer me a level of comfort, and a sense of maybe well-being.
Yeah. We in our church, we kind of went through some of this stuff as well, kind of that book, Emotional Healthy Spirituality, and some of these things. And what I've come to conclude is that this conversation we're having, the development of, because part of what we're talking about is the development of the soul. It's how I think.
Yeah.
It's how my experience has shaped what I think. It's how I feel and the impact of it. That we're talking about discipleship here, and that place of being discipled and matured. And in that, there is stages of growth that are pretty important within the journey of discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm seeing is that in some of the exposure of some of the leaders within the body of Christ, some of the fundamental discipleship of becoming a mature human being, a mature man, a mature woman, those things didn't take place.
Mm-hmm.
I have in some situations, I've got a little bit of grace going, you never saw this modeled, and you never had anybody speak. And so shame has been a major factor in your entire life.
Yeah.
And it's at least giving me a little bit of understanding on how did you get here? Because if we don't take time to really do some of this foundation, like go back and redig some of the foundations, great will be our fall, is kind of some of the conclusions I've come to. And that's go ahead.
It'll be the same storyline that I alluded to earlier, is that the storyline of most of human history is men being entrusted with power and them bringing harm to those entrusted to their care.
Yeah. No, I mean, we could almost do a mic drop there.
Yeah.
Because, we've all been given places of authority, and it doesn't mean title of a ministry. We all have authority and we all have influence.
Yeah.
And we are called to in that sphere, handle the authority given to us, with both men and women, with Christ-likeness.
There's this great quote I wanted to get to, and it's from this book, Becoming a King, which maybe we'll touch on in a second. But I think it kind of speaks to what we're talking about right now, is that men were made to come through. And I think that there is a God-given design for men and women in our mandates of what I'm still coming to understand more of what that means. But this quote, men were made to come through, to rise to the occasion. They were made to engage, to act, to offer a strength in love and sacrifice so that others can flourish. They were made to bring a strength that, woven together with vulnerability and beauty, could bring forth life beyond telling. Men were made for action, to protect, to provide. And then this last couple lines here, to come through in a manner that allows others to rest, to provide for others protection in places both physically and soulfully, to be known and above all loved. Men were made to fix things, whether it is a broken mower or a broken heart. They were made for war so that others might experience peace through their sacrifice. And it goes on, but I think that's the antithesis of the opposite of what we're talking about, of when men are engaged in their God-given design and walking in it, is the impact of a good man is you feel at rest. You feel that you can actually flourish to be who God made you to be. But there is a fierceness and a strength that men bring that when it is aligned with the kingdom, it provides the safety for others to flourish and to grow. And I think that that's ultimately where the journey began for me. Is I want to be the type of man that others flourish in my care. So I have to start with being curious about what is my real impact on others. And particularly those that are closest to me. It's pretty easy to hide or fake it with friends. But in the confines of a covenant relationship where you can't hide, what's my real impact?
Yeah, that's pretty significant, because what you're tapping into is what it means. I mean, again, I just said it, but it's a little bit, what do I do with my authority and how does it impact others? And you're saying there's a certain amount of, and at times often a painful journey, but it's a journey to produce that so that when I am given leadership, I can handle it in Christ-likeness.
Yeah.
Because you stepped away from a job that you had for I don't know, 6-7 years, something like that.
Yep.
And then you stepped into an environment that was in need in some ways.
Yep.
And I know it was incredibly challenging for you. And I'm going to ask you to brag on yourself a little bit. But you were there for a year, you had a specific assignment, and then you transitioned out.
Yeah.
But just, I want you to, and it's, I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot here, but I want you to tell us, what did some of the staff say to you when you left? You know what I'm talking about?
So I think to respond is the role that I took for about a year was very challenging. But I think very quickly what I came to realize was it was an opportunity to love and serve people in a way that they probably had never been served before or led before.
Because you stepped into a managerial role leading some people.
Yep.
And Yep.
And so I was in a leadership role, small team, but it kind of quickly became my goal and mission in that role to what would it look like for the team's experience of me to be that they could be at rest. Even in my office, their boss, so to speak, but for them to show up at work in which there was a lot of chaos happening, for them to feel that my presence or my impact predominantly was that they were going to be heard, advocated for, to feel safe, to feel, even in some ways at rest. And so that's kind of the way I strove to, and all of that stemmed, Dwayne, out of honestly doing these reps in marriage and parenting. So many instances where I felt the challenge of leadership, I really fell back on the tools that I had been utilizing in my home for years. And
that's amazing.
And ultimately it just came down to letting people feel heard. And so to answer maybe the specifics of your question, I left and one of our team members said, I really wish that I knew with confidence that God had a plan for my life like you do. Mm-hmm. And I think that really came out of just this relationship of serving and loving people, and not really anything else.
But I'm also gonna say, I think one of the comments, correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, but I don't know if I'm going to ever find a work environment like you have created, something like that. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah.
It was something along those lines, correct?
Yeah.
And so my point, it was kind of leading. I apologize. I didn't set it up, the question up perfect for you.
Yeah.
But my point is, you walked into an environment that was a little unstable. You brought stability, and you stayed on task. You were taking your lead from the leadership, but yet you provided stability and got the thing pretty stable, running smoothly, and provided, like, you really helped that in that year you were there. And so some of the stuff I'm throwing on you, but in that development as a man, how did your development impact your leadership there? Does that question make sense? Sorry, we'll pause.
We'll pause.
Thank goodness for River. I can edit this. Our dog's going nuts. Can you hear the dog?
It's very loud.
It is? Okay.
Yeah.
Dang, stupid dog.
That's why I didn't respond, because it was so loud.
So she usually calms down. Oh my God. Can someone? Yeah, can you? Because I can hear it up here. It's probably the electrician. He's probably. So, in your development, oh my gosh, I'm gonna shut the door. Hold on. Sorry.
You're okay.
Okay. So, in that role you fulfilled in that office, what part of your development that you've taken time to mature into do you think enabled you to be successful in that task? Does that question make sense?
Yeah. Well, I think, to be honest, and to honestly be a little vulnerable, is the only thing that kept me in that role. There was so much challenge. There was so much even crisis that happened during the time that I was there.
Yeah.
And I was looking for opportunities to eject.
Wow.
To be vulnerable. I was like, God, this is too much. And this isn't what I signed up for.
Yeah.
I felt very justified even in what it would look like to walk away. And I have to be careful now, even too, with my language, because I felt personally that it wasn't that the Lord wouldn't let me, but truly the opportunities didn't pan out. There were things that kind of came up that just never worked out, and it seemed to me that it was that I was supposed to be there through these really challenging circumstances. And so I would say the thing that I was able, that was in place, I was able to fall back on, was this category of initiation, that God was up to something in me through the process of learning how, in what were very challenging circumstances, how to show up and love people, how to lead, how to offer my strength on behalf of others, and for the net impact to be positive, even what was through some very challenging situations. And so, but I think, again, I don't want to paint some picture of I'm saintly. It's like, oh my gosh, I was, week in, week out going, how in the heck am I supposed to do this, God? And, there's this Dallas Willard quote that goes, the address for God is the end of your rope. And I felt like that I found his address. It was every day going, Lord, help me today to be loving, to be true. And I think that, by his grace, I was able to do that. But this category of initiation, he is growing me up through this experience. What I would have previously thought wouldn't have been possible. And there were so many days where I felt completely overwhelmed. And also, this season happened to coincide exactly with the IHOP stuff. And so here I was in this crazy, challenging work environment. And then, all of the IHOP stuff is happening at the same moment. And I'm having to find a faith that's bigger than the one that's crumbling down the road. I'm having to find a God and spirituality that actually works in the workplace. And yeah, is operational for me in day-to-day life and leading my family through a very challenging season of life. So the the place of God is growing me up, even in places where I don't understand it. There's mystery, there's loss, there's grief, I'm being hard pressed on every side, and coming to a place of surrender and truly, I think, learning how to walk with Him through really hard things. You can't make that stuff up or plan for
No.
that kind of development or growth.
No, yeah, you don't want to go looking for it.
No, you don't. Wouldn't
mean-
recommend it.
Would not recommend it. But kind of, this will be my last question. Then
Yeah.
I actually want to jump in a little bit to the book,
Sure.
Becoming a King. But how has, one of the things at IHOP was the Word and meditation, reading the Word, and actually learning to feed yourself. And that's something actually I learned at IHOP, and I'm incredibly grateful for. I love my Bible.
Yeah.
How has the Scripture and your just learning to feed yourself, how have you leaned into that in these last 3 to 4 years? But some of what we're talking about, how has it played a role in that journey for you?
Yeah. I think similarly, like IHOP there were some seeds sown for me, a love for the Word and engaging with the Word that I am very thankful for. I think in the last couple of years, just because of all the IHOP stuff, it did get very complicated. Of understanding, like I've had to not evaluate, but find my own path back to Scripture, and part of that path has been engaging in places that are accessible, and so the Psalms, but then kind of ironically, it's like when I got to IHOP, very quickly there was this taboo, like the Message translation is not a real translation.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, and so it's like actually the Message translation in the last couple of years has been one of the most life-giving avenues for me with engaging with Scripture.
Amen.
And so finding, there's been a few portions that have just been such a lifeline of real language that my heart can relate to. And there's a lot that we could say about the Bible, and certainly my journey in it is still very much in recovery. But in this phase of recovery, it's finding the prayers and language in the Bible that I can relate to God around, and can become a launch pad for engaging in dialogue with Him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. Because it's so, I've seen you in our church, and I've seen you around other men, and the Word has, from my observation, it's actually become a place where you've really found some strength. And I appreciate that about you, is that you've pushed through some of that traffic, if you will, and you've found strength in that. And it's something I've admired and I've watched you kind of walk through that, because you got certain people, even when you read a certain scripture in your head, and there takes a little bit, if that was not a positive experience, to push through. And
Yeah.
I've seen the Word be something that has been real stabilizing for you.
It certainly feels that way of, I think if nothing else, like, can I go back to the Word and see God living and active in Scripture, and not the words of a man, but the words of God. It's very stabilizing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And something that was just almost taboo in some of the experiences with IHOP was to go and drink from other wells. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you've kind of went and jumped in a couple of different wells. And so a book that has had a significant impact is Becoming a King.
Yeah.
And so just speak to that book a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it's...
Yeah. So again, I think the pathway for me was, through books like Fathered by God by John Eldredge, and then so Morgan Snyder, who wrote Becoming a King, worked alongside John Eldredge for about 25 years at that ministry.
Okay.
And
wow, I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah, and so he kind of went on his own version of this same journey of what does it mean to become a man where, the predominant impact of relating to him, whether it's his wife or kids, is their flourishing, their safety, their good. And so he kind of went on this path and journey of writing letters with older men, and gleaning from their wisdom and asking just questions about life and where they wish that they would have done a better job as a husband, father, whatever, and then really begin to distill and compile down some of this wisdom. And it really, at the end of the day, becomes a path and a journey of the ancient way of rediscovering what it means to engage with the gospel as a man. And so as a son of God, what does it mean for me to step into the identity of what it means to be a son, to become a generalist, of what it means to be a man that can function in the role of husband, father, and career, in my skills with my hands, but also with my heart. Like, these are broad categories that every man should have access to. So the book came out in 2020. It's 5 years old now, and I would say it's been one of the most impactful and influential resources in my life, of helping me again begin to bridge the gap of what it looks like operationally to be a man that loves God and walks with Him in the roles that I carry in day-to-day life.
And so you did you do a group with Morgan, or did you do a group with other guys going through the book the first time?
Yeah, I think I participated in a group with Morgan. Briefly. It wasn't like it was. There's like 200 people, so it wasn't like one-on-one. But yeah, so participated in one with him, and then I've led probably 3 or 4 groups of men through this book over the years. Yeah.
Well, because I've talked with guys who have going through with you through this book, and it's been actually pretty profound revelation in their hearts of the impact that it's had. And so I'm looking at their lives and their testimony going, this is pretty powerful fruit.
Yeah.
That in changes that have just been pretty foundational for them. And I've got more than a couple in my head even. So what would be the boom, boom, boom that he kind of hits in the book that you'd go, hey, this is what?
Yeah. I think it's back to some of this conversation that we've been having, is around the idea of men being entrusted with power and where it's gone wrong. And so he, shares quite a few stories of like, why is it that when we look at headlines, that it's, every month now, it feels like, as there's another major scandal of a man that the perception was they were the guy that had it all together, and it turns out that their kingdom was crumbling, and behind closed doors they were causing a lot of harm. And so what would it be like to become the type of man that, when entrusted with power, the impact would be that people flourished? And so this category of initiation, of what it means to let God mature and develop and grow you up as a man, through circumstances, through my really challenging career, in that role of God was growing me up as a man and initiating me as a son lovingly, in ways that I didn't understand and probably would not have even chosen. But because I had a category of going, what are you up to, God, in this? I was able to flourish, to grow through that process. Yeah, some other broad stroke categories I mentioned earlier: true self, false self, a little bit around attachment, but I think what I would say is men need a space to talk with other men about the ways that these things are operational in day-to-day life. What has been profoundly forming for me is hearing the ways that other men are wrestling with these ideas in their context, because it's different for all of us. Our family of origin story and what we got there, and then now where we find ourselves, it's going to be different for every single man. But it becomes so hopeful when I hear a man in honesty and vulnerability share that he really has a desire to grow in whatever area it is. Even 12 years into marriage, I feel so young at learning how to steward my wife's heart and loving her generously, emotionally, creating safety for her desires to actually be heard and known. We're 12 years in, and I'm going, I'm really new at this. And sometimes it actually takes hearing another guy say that to be able to be honest enough to say it myself of, oh gosh, like, man, I could really level up in this area. And so being in the midst of a company of men that I don't have all the answers, the book doesn't have all the answers, but it's going to facilitate some conversation for what it means to grow in God for us personally as men, and then to bring goodness to our context, and whether that's in marriage or not, or in your career or friendships, it's had a very profound impact.
And so you're going to run one of these, like a book study around this book through the summer. Just talk on, just because do you have spaces open?
Yeah, so
I know we're going to open this up, but so I'm guessing it's limited spaces left.
We do have space, and we're going to do it over Zoom because I actually initially was just going to offer it men locally, but even locally, I've found that it's better to do it over Zoom because it's just hard to coordinate schedules to be in the same place. And so it's going to be 6 weeks, starting kind of mid-July, and we'll do a weekly 90-minute session. One of my strong convictions is that if you show up, you're going to get something out of this. And that doesn't even mean you have to read the book. Of course, you're going to get a lot more out of it if you read the book.
For sure.
To say it this way, it's like, to the extent that you invest yourself in this resource, you're going to get out of it. But I structure it in such a way where if you show up and you haven't read the material, you'll still be able to engage. And there's a video that we'll watch, and then we launch into some questions and dialogue, and try to keep it heavy around more the interacting, not as much of I'm not going to be talking the whole time.
Right. And I think it's one of the things that in our church, by the way, there's an announcement coming. Jennifer and I'll make an announcement about our community actually in a little bit. But one of the things that profoundly impacted me was a place for men to talk vulnerably, be honest. It was kept in that group, but I found deep connection with other men, an essential part of I want for my spirituality and my community. It really impacted me. And I think it's something that you offer in those groups. It's pretty beautiful. It's actually beautiful. It's profound.
Thank you.
And I would, guys, I don't know how much space he's got left, but I would recommend it. It's a book study that he walks you through, but I'm saying I've seen men really be impacted by it. Because again, the whole journey of discipleship is a holistic idea. And I think for such a long time, I had just a portion of being a disciple, and it really got me into I got off for a while. I think in my own personal development, absolutely. And then what it means even then to disciple others. I think I've had to make significant course correction. Anything else you want to say, just kind of that something that we maybe missed or anything that you'd want to just highlight around this topic?
Yeah, I mean, I think just the last to respond to what you just said there is, as image bearers of God, what does it mean and look like for me to express the image of God, the uniqueness that He's deposited in me? That has to be a holistic approach. And so I think just to agree all the more of my formation, my becoming, should look like more of Jesus being expressed in and through my life. As a husband, father, in my career, in my creativity, in my body, in my emotions. And so it absolutely includes every category. And so it's not limited to just what does it look like to be a churchgoer and, a good Christian. It looks like caring for my body. It looks like caring for my emotions and my soul, caring for, me day to day of what it looks like to be a healthy man that's able to offer my strength and love to others. And primarily for me, it's in my family context. But so I think it's been a big change in my thinking, is beyond just what it looks like to be, quote, a Christian, but what does it look like to express the image of God in my life through every facet of what I do.
Yeah, that's I mean, maybe it's a good way for us to end here, but, I think a little bit what we're talking about here is I've only recently come to get a little bit of clarity on the second commandment, that I am to love my neighbor as I love myself. And if I am not integrated, if I am not holistically developed to where I actually am at rest and peace with who I am, my capacity to love others is significantly limited. And I think that's a little bit what we've been talking about here, is that place of I'm at rest in my soul with myself.
Yep.
And I'm going to say that took me over 50 years to get to that place. I'm going to say 52, 53, 54. And it took me a while. And I think partly is because I had some gaps in my formation, my development in my journey into manhood. And I think what you've highlighted, the journey you've gone on, you're like 2 decades ahead of me. But you're a man I'm very proud of, just to watch your growth, your maturity, and what you've come out of and stepped into is pretty impressive, Isaac. As I've watched you even this last couple of years, it's just water's thrown you up against some pretty tough rocks and you've been beat up a little bit. Just life's been challenging. That God's initiating you into some areas that's pretty beautiful, actually.
Yeah.
You're a man I really do respect in your journeys. Yeah, man. So how do we just say it here, and I'll throw it in the book study. How do they get?
Sure. Yeah.
And
I'll throw it in the
description.
If you want to reach out, you can go to isaacsmith.online, and that is a registration page right now for the book study, but it's isaacsmith.online.
Okay, isaacsmith.online. Yeah, and you put your name in there, whatever, and reach out. It'll reach out to him that way. I'll put it in the description as well. Make sure. Well, thank you, bro, for jumping on here. Really appreciated it. And I think also what we're wanting to do, even on the podcast, is what we want to hear from redemptive stories that have weathered and are still weathering, coming out of just IHOP and that experience and the news everybody's here. What is those redemptive things? And you're a man that I would say has you've chose, I'm going to do this in a redemptive manner. And so that's a little bit even why I wanted to interview. So I appreciate it. Thanks for jumping on, man.
Thanks, Dwayne.
Yeah, you bet. All right, grace, people. Jennifer and I will be sharing. We've got some we're in a huge just change in our lives. So we'll be sharing it probably maybe the next podcast. So be tuned in.